Hi, and welcome to our presentation about farming for native bee health.
For our final project, we compared conventional, organic, and regenerative farming practices for their ability to sustain native bee health. Agriculture is a major driver of Canada's economy. However, the fast-growing demand for agricultural product has resulted in unsustainable farming practices. The increased pesticide use during conventional farming resulted in declined health of bee population, in turn requiring Health Canada to implement various regulations to reduce pesticide use, such as neonicotinoids. Furthermore, Canadian farmers moved away from conventional farming, which includes the use of chemical to promote plant growth and fight pests, towards organic farming, which relies on natural principles and the avoidance of synthetic and chemical inputs. However, the constraints associated with organic farming and the environmental impact of conventional farming later gave rise to regenerative farming. This describes farming and grazing practices that, among other benefits, reverses climate change by rebuilding soil organic matter and restoring degraded soil biodiversity. Based on various research, regenerative and organic farming has been proven to be superior regarding supporting native bee health than conventional farming. The purpose of this report is to compare and contrast the conventional, organic, and regenerative farming practices for their abilities to sustain native bees. This report will test the hypothesis that conventional farming has the greatest negative impacts on native bees due to the excessive use of pesticide and unsustainable farming practices.
In order to test our hypothesis, we looked into the policies that farmers are expected to follow for conventional and organic agriculture. This provided information on what types of inputs are allowed to be used on crops. We also looked at the Wild Species Report to see how the federal and provincial governments have evaluated the issue. We analyzed the inputs for conventional, organic, and regenerative farming, and then used peer-reviewed literature to assess the impact that they had had on the environment and native bee populations.
Additionally, throughout our partnership with Isla Fenton, we further understood the ecological importance of organic farming industry and regenerative practices. The knowledge gained throughout this report helped further understand the importance of various types of farming holds on native bee health.
The Wild Species Report is a collaboration of all provincial and territorial governments in Canada and of the federal government. It assesses the conservation status of fungal, plant, and animal species in Canada. Native vascular plants were found to be 52% secure and face threats such as habitat loss, habitat degradation, and invasive species. Native bee species are 41% secure and face many threats, including the loss of habitat and food resources, pesticide exposure, disease transmission from managed bee populations, and climate change. We determine the amount of farms in Canada that are conventional, organic, or regenerative in their farming methods. The inputs we were evaluating were the main pest control methods and soil inputs. Conventional agriculture methods are employed within the majority of Canadian farms. Agriculture Canada has approved over 400 pesticides, including herbicides, fungicides, and insecticides. Synthetic fertilizers are approved to ensure plants get the appropriate mineral profile for proper growth. Only 2.2% of Canadian farms are certified organic, but the demand for organic produce among consumers is growing rapidly. The organic sector avoids the use of synthetic pesticides, opting for more natural methods like acetic acid, corn gluten, and diatomaceous earth. Natural fertilizers of organic origin are permitted, such as composted animal and plant matter, and treated animal waste. Regenerative agriculture is very new, but there are currently 78 farms across Canada that associate with the recent trend. The main practices of regenerative agriculture include the use of cover crops, no-till agriculture, diverse crop rotations, and the inclusion of plants and animals on the same land. The ecosystem is considered together, so if there are issues with pests, then the response can involve a natural predator, rather than interrupting that natural system with pesticides. Finally, we determined the environmental effects and how they ultimately support native bee populations. We found that conventional agriculture had multiple negative environmental effects associated with monocropping, synthetic fertilizer use, and tilling methods. For those reasons, we determined that this was not conducive to native bee health. Organic agriculture has realized benefits, such as reduced water pollution and uses less non-renewable resources. Although certification is required, there is evidence that organic farming has a beneficial influence on native bee populations. Regenerative farming, however, outperforms the previous two. It achieves economic resilience by using a holistic ecosystem approach. Using regenerative farming methods can reduce the amount spent on pesticides and fertilizers. No certification is needed, so this is also more accessible to farmers who still want to preserve the soil and water systems for future generations. Encouraging diverse species on the farm and reducing the use of pesticides and other soil inputs overall provides a more stable environment for native bees.
We partnered with Ayla Fenton as our community partner to help us gain first-hand knowledge into the organic farming industry and regenerative practices. Ayla has been in the organic farming sector for 8 years and recently transitioned to a position at Loving Spoonful. She's a stakeholder and is highly invested in helping to preserve native bees. In a virtual interview, she was able to share first-hand knowledge on how organic farming works and give insights into agricultural policies and practices in Canada. We were able to take some key takeaways away from the interview. Industrial farming is unsustainable because of the combination of large inputs in fossil fuels and environmental degradation through practices such as monocropping and separation of livestock and plants. Better policies are highlighted as a major need, including education policies, and the economics of organic farming are a barrier. Farmers are incentivized to grow things that aren't suitable for the health of the environment, and Canada's crop insurance programs only apply to monoculture. In order to protect our native bees as well as sustainably feed the growing population, we need regenerative agriculture. Our proposal breaks it down to 3 layers. We begin with farmer implementation of hedgerow management and pollinator strips. Then, to reach the goal of overall greater ecosystem health, we need government support for farmers. Finally, we reach healthier ecosystems by utilizing holistic ecosystem management. Intentional planting of pollinator strips instead of large monocrop fields will help to encourage native bee species. This would involve the pattern of planting crops, then natural vegetation that supports biodiversity, then planting crops again. Hedgerow replanting and management, which includes filling gaps in hedges and other native species to encourage biodiversity and improve habitat for other species, is also encouraged. Altering existing hedgerows by planting more diverse native species would take minimal investment but result in long-term benefits, as not only will crops be protected, but it provides habitats for native species. The current government-to-farmer relationship is heavily centered on promoting monocropping. There needs to be an implementation of government subsidies and grants to help farmers begin to incorporate regenerative farming into their practice. Governments also need to be working to help bridge the divide of individual farms by promoting local knowledge sharing between farmers and giving them resources to do so. Finally, we need to see an overall change in how agriculture and nature are viewed. While conventional and organic farming differ in ways pest problems are tackled, both fail to address the root of the problem and acknowledge that if there is a pest problem, there likely is an ecological imbalance. There is an essential need to start integrating natural ecosystem functions within agriculture. Encouraging ecologically conscious farming methods increases habitat protection on a local scale for diverse bee and pollinator species.
The maintenance of native bee population requires an ecosystem solution which conventional farming lacks, organic farming doesn't quite meet, but regenerative farming achieves. Understanding how conventional farming has taken its toll on the local ecosystem is the first step to address the root of this problem. Regenerative farming is becoming the next natural step for farmers who are concerned about preserving local species, habitat, ecosystem, and their services. Further research into regenerative farming practices would be helpful in order to better quantify the benefits it provides. With the support of the government, regenerative farming provides a path to equitably provide for the growing population while also protecting natural resources and ensuring overall ecosystem health.
Thanks for your attention and have a great day.